Hey guys, Mr. V over here, doing a book review today for Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family by Robert Kolker. This is a nonfiction book about a family who between 1945 and 1965 had 12 kids, but 6 of those kids ended up developing schizophrenia, and it goes in depth about that family. The author, what he did was he did hundreds of hours of interviews with different members, friends, neighbors, teachers, therapists, caregivers, colleagues, relatives, and researchers to learn more about the family. So he does a very in-depth dive to learn about the family, which is why it's a very well-written book of a seemingly normal family, but who have some dark secrets which they are trying not to share with others. Before considering this book, I want you to know that this is a dark subject matter. 6 of the kids developed schizophrenia, which is already a very tough subject. But the book has hospitalizations, it has different types of violence, has domestic violence, even includes child molestation. So know that this is a darker book before considering reading this book. Another thing you want to be prepared for if you want to read this book is there are a lot of names. The family has 12 kids, so that's already a lot of names because that's 14 if you include the mother and father. But sometimes they'll have friends or they'll have grandparents, or there's just a lot of names in the book. So if you want to read this book, prepare for that as well. But if you do want to read this book, it is an interesting read. But you have to be patient because the beginning of the book is not boring, but it's a little bit slower because he gives you the background to the family. I mean, he explains how they had 12 kids between 1945 and 1965. And the background of the grandparents and the mother and the father, but he also gives you a background at the time about how it was in the 1950s and the 1960s, and how at that time the medical fields would blame the parents for many things, and they even found ways to blame the mother for many things. So that is why some of these families didn't tell doctors about some of these medical things in those times because of that. But around, like, I'd say, I don't know if it's a 15 or 20% mark of the book, that's when some weird things start to happen, and that's when the main part of the book goes on about how the kids, one of them especially starts to develop schizophrenia, and some of the crazy things that start to happen, and some of the tough things that start to happen with the family. And then you see that by the mid-1970s, 6 of them have schizophrenia, and it's just like the whole family is just in so much trouble at that point, and it shows that. But it's definitely an interesting book, because it's an interesting look into a family who is like seemingly has life together. They seem like the perfect family, yet they had so many secrets because they did not want people to know that. Now, they did have 12 children, which that is a little odd. That's not something that's common. Most people don't have 12 children. But other than that, the kids seem to be doing so well. They seem to be doing well in school and sports, and they were very social. And the parents were running a government organization. I don't remember the name right now, but the father was meeting high-powered people, even different governors or international people. So from an outsider's perspective, they seemed like just a great family, and things were so well put together. But the inside, there were many struggles, and they did not want people to know because they felt it would hurt their image. So that was happening. And they were even sometimes hiding things from their kids. Some of the kids, knew which brothers had schizophrenia, but there was some other medical things they did not know until the kids had turned 60s or even 70s. They were given these medical papers after their parents passed away, and that's why these parents sometimes kept a lot hidden from even some of their kids their whole life, and they show sometimes the impact it had. But it's also interesting to see, not just for this family, but just to see how some of these families, there are families out there, many American families do, not just American families, many families across the whole world do keep secrets from the outsider's perspective, not to this extreme, but just because they feel it will hurt their image. And there's so many families that do that and don't want people to know, and how how many people keep these secrets just because they don't want it hurting their family image. And it's just, you really get a glimpse into that, because there are many just everyday families that do that because the parents felt they could manage everything. Now they had 12 kids and 6 had schizophrenia, and they felt that they could really manage it without much outside help. Yes, they went to the doctors later, but they felt they could really do it without much outside help. But that is just so difficult, and you really get to see what it's like in this book. And he does a great job of keeping you engaged with it, because there's a lot of very interesting stories throughout the whole book. Some, for example, are like at one point, and it's sad, but like how sometimes the kids would just move all the furniture outside, or that they would see random delusions, or they were sometimes on the verge of hurting themselves or hurting others. Which I said, that's why it's a very dark book. You have to prepare for that. But there are definitely interesting stories, and you'd have to read it to learn more about it, because there's a lot of stories in the book about what happened. But he really gives you a glimpse into the life and the difficulties of schizophrenia, but also the life of seeming perfect from the outside, but having so many struggles on the inside. And he really gives you a glimpse into that life, because they became very well known in the medical field for their schizophrenia. Another cool part was in between the chapters, there would be a lot of like background information to schizophrenia in the medical field. And he was giving you the background information of different medical studies or different scientific backgrounds. And it was great seeing that, and like how it changed from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s to even the modern times. This was published in 2020. So he shows you about where the progress is in 2017. So you get to see the progress that's happened. And one of the biggest things they keep debating, and he talks about it more in the book, is it genetic or is it the surroundings that cause them to develop it? So you really see that in the book, and he does cover a lot. Now, one of the things that I did not like about the book was that while he does cover all the kids, again, there's 12 of them, and he gives you stories about all of them, you get to know who all of them are. Many of the chapters are from the viewpoints of the two sisters. They did not develop schizophrenia, and you can tell that he interviewed them the most, because you get the viewpoint from their perspective the most, more so than any of the others. And some of the kids actually get very few stories about them. Even some of the ones that did not develop it and moved away, or sometimes only come back for certain things, you didn't really get their perspective. Like, I'm sometimes curious, like, what did they think about, more than just the two sisters, their life after? What are the other siblings who moved away? What did they feel? And maybe the other siblings refused to be interviewed. Maybe it was not his fault. But that was one of the tough parts for the book, was you didn't get the perspective from some of the others as much. And then towards the end of the book, it talked a lot about the sisters and their feuds towards the end of their life, or they were still alive, but when they were in their 70s. So that was only one of the tough parts about the book for me, or one of the parts I did not like about the book. Not one of the tough parts, but one of the parts I did not like about the book. But overall, I would say this was a fascinating read if you want to learn about schizophrenia. Again, if you want to learn about it, because this goes from a family who experienced it in the most extreme cases, where 6 kids had it. And you get to see what it was like for them without, how they had kids without schizophrenia and with schizophrenia, because half of them had it. But so many had it. And he goes through it without overly complex medical terms, which helps a lot as well. But this book is definitely not for the masses. Not only is this a dark book, as I said, but this is not a book that you just pick up, you read like a couple lines on the back, and you can just easily jump into it. Because, as I said, the subject matter is very depressing, but you also want to make sure that you want to read the subject. I think if you don't want to read the subject, it will be a book that people will pick up, read a few chapters, and put down. But if you are curious about it, or you're curious about how this family went into it and just what they did, then this definitely was a fascinating read for those perspectives. But if you guys have any questions, or you have any comments, please post it in the comment section below, because I always love hearing your perspectives. If you guys like the book review today, hit the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. It's Mr. V.